Hi, today what I'm going to do is I'm reinforcing this. This is obviously a mould of a pregnant woman, and I'm going to be making a sculpture for her, but in order to use this I need to reinforce it. So when I'm actually casting off somebody at the time, I want to get them in and out as quickly as possible, because otherwise there can be a lot of discomfort, and particularly for people who are pregnant, you don't want them standing around too long because they can feel dizzy and can faint. So it has to be very, very quick. So this shell is it's made in two parts. So I cast the woman to the halfway mark and the other side, and then pulled it apart to get off. So I didn't join it up. It's just got joiners over at the moment to keep the two bits together. So when it was drying, it didn't collapse or warp, and it's just a very thin shell. Now, what I'm using for this, and what I do when I'm casting someone, first of all, if you're going to cast someone, check they're not allergic to plaster. You can do a tiny patch test. This is the plaster I use. I use Plaster Bandage, and it's plaster impregnated bandage, quite suitable in this case, which means there's plaster powder embedded in it. When I dip it in water, it becomes active, and then it will start sort of like foaming up once I've used it. And some people are allergic to plaster. I've never actually met someone, so I don't think it's a common occurrence, but I do know that there are some people who get really, really awful burns from it. So you can cut like a little inch square, a couple of centimetres square of this, give it to someone prior to casting them, and ask them if they can dip it in water, get the plaster going on it, and put it on sort of like somewhere around like a wrist or near the hand. That area is actually quite delicate skin, and it's pretty good to show a reaction, and to put it on, leaving it to harden, and then to take it off. I use Vaseline as a barrier first, because, or any petroleum based emollient, because that will act as a protection. Your body is covered in, even if you're not very hairy, your skin is covered in tiny, tiny little hairs, and what you need to do is sort of stop those sticking to the plaster. So I use Vaseline. If someone's very hairy, then I'll use a silicone base before, so I'll actually use a special Mold Life silicone that's incredibly expensive. You know, little tubs of it like that are like £50 each. But that will give a layer first, and that doesn't stick to hair because it's a medical grade one I use, so that protects people. Anyway, get someone to do a patch test and check, and if they are allergic, don't go near them with it, because you don't want to end up being in trouble, because if you're, anyway, you can imagine. So I'm going to reinforce this piece today. Before I start, I'm going to spray it with water, and all I've got, this is an old cleaning fluid bottle that I've washed out really, really thoroughly. It's finished, and I've got ordinary water in there, and I'm just spraying it. Because the piece has stiffened up and hardened, it's not a problem wetting it again, because it will stay quite firm. So I've just realised I've got this noise on over here. So as well as all the builders work in the background, you might not be able to hear me. Anyway, you wet it all over quite thoroughly. I'm just going to work on this front side first. If you don't, then the new layer of plaster doesn't stick to the old layer. And it'll be a waste of time. And when you're spraying, remember undercuts on things. Obviously this one has got quite obvious undercuts on under the breast and under the stomach, but remember undercuts because they get missed. Now, I've cut in advance a whole load of plaster bandage for doing this, and I reckon I need to put on another couple of layers all over. I've got a bowl here filled to about here with water. I've made it warmish because I don't want to put my hands in cold. I don't want it hot because it'll go off too quickly. And all I do is take this, put it in, so I've dipped it in, and then if you're being really fussy, you can just shake it off and get some of the water off. Because I'm not working on a person, it doesn't matter if it's a bit wet and sloppy. I'll put it in place. Straighten it out. It's a bit fiddly. If you start using this, you want to practice a bit first before you start working on people, because it is a bit fiddly and it tends to flop over and fold. And the plaster impregnated bandage I either use Gypsona or Modrock. Now I'm in Britain, so I can get those from British suppliers, and I'm not sure what you'd use somewhere else. But I found that there are different qualities of it, and if you buy cheap stuff, this stuff's quite expensive. It comes in rolls that I have to roll off and cut to length. But if you use sorry, I'm going to wipe my nose. If you use a cheap one that's produced for craft work with children, it tends to be slightly grittier and not as strong. These ones are the quality of Plaster Bandage that was used when they used to set broken limbs. Using Plaster Bandage, it's that quality, so it's really good. Some people, when they're working with it, will take up the whole roll. Will take the whole roll and dip the whole roll in, so it's all wound up, and then use that to bind around. I found that if I did that, so just trying to push it into the gap so there isn't any air underneath. I find that if I do that, then that's a problem. Now, I'm going to double up here because I think the plaster's not quite strong enough down here. And it will also help me speed up. Stop you getting too bored, huh? I'm wearing gloves not because this stuff affects me particularly, but because I do a lot of messy wet work. I find that if I don't protect my hands, sometimes my skin just dries out too much and begins to crack, but it's not because I'm allergic to this. One safety thing though you have to do if you're working with plaster bandage is when you're cutting it, wear a particle mask or a mask of some sort, a dust mask, you know, the sort that you can get from hardware stores for when you're rubbing down wood at home and you don't want to breathe in the dust. Those to protect you, because plaster itself, if you breathe in enough of it, can be carcinogenic, and obviously you don't want to have to deal with that. And there are quite a history of sculptors who have died from the side effects of working with their materials. And it's one of those things because lots of sculptors started in the days before health and safety risk assessments at college, or because people are self-taught at home and don't think about it. A lot of people aren't fully aware of the side effects of some of the materials that they're working with. I mean, the good rule of thumb is if it produces dust, it's probably not good for you. So try to avoid it. This stuff's not so bad because as soon as you dip it in the water, the dust becomes active as wet plaster and isn't airborne anymore. And this is a really nice medium as well if you want to make sculptures just from the plaster and not use it for working into like I do. When I was at college, I used to make large metal structures, sometimes things I welded together, quite big, right up to the ceiling things, built in situ, and then wrapped them in plaster bandage to make strange, almost sort of Alice in Wonderland type creatures crawling out down from the ceiling. But it's a really nice medium. It is expensive, but it's just so lovely to work with and gives you such nice results that it's worth investing in. Nice material, I think. And I've just folded it over there because I want to make this seam stronger. Here where I'm going overlapping on the top edge, I'm folding out because I didn't wet the mould on the inside, cast on the inside, so it won't attach there, so it has to attach to itself there, like that. And then what I'll do, I've almost finished this front side. When I finish this, I'll actually go round and reinforce all round the edges of it because they tend to be on the weaker side. And I'll just make sure that they're nice and strong. I'm just tapping it to feel if there's any give. If it moves too easily, it's a sign that that area is thinner. When I'm actually casting on a person, I'm not always entirely sure as I'm working how thick it is. I do a bit of tapping, but you can't tap someone too much. Good. Okay, and then I'll stop you there because you've probably got the idea. So I'm looking in the wrong place. Okay, bye-bye.